Hi.
Hi, I'm here with Marcus.
I'm here with Lisa.
This is my really good friend, and I invited him to have some uncomfortable conversations with me
Yes.
that we want to share.
I'm already uncomfortable.
So, first, can you tell me about your ancestral heritage?
I am Chinese and Vietnamese. My mother immigrated during the Vietnam War. My father came over before that and lived in, anyway, yeah, so came from southern China, immigrated in the 50s.
And in your view, what are some of the stereotypes of being Asian?
None at all. Yeah, we're perfectly integrated, equalized. I think growing up, it was the first and most noticeable one is the model minority stereotype. So it's like the Asian is the model minority of all the other ones. Everyone else is causing trouble, like, making a lot of noise and causing all these kinds of problems in society. And the Asians are the ones that are just quiet and we just do our work and we fit in, we conform. We become doctors, lawyers, engineers. We contribute to society. We don't make a fuss. We don't do political stuff. And we just fit in and we're just all around nice and quiet. And we're like, don't make a problem. And so pull my model minority is not just that. It's like, yeah, it's a kind of, it doesn't give us really a voice. It's like we're blending in and that's what all Asians are like. And sort of that was the projection, I think, onto me. And also I also liked it. It's like the bit of a golden shadow of like, okay, like we're accepted in this way and that feels safe. And so we should just stay in those boundaries and we should be within the parameters of that projection.
But it's partly making yourself invisible.
Very much so. And anything about Asian culture being invisible other than our food. Like the food's good, so have some of our food.
We love food.
Have some pho, have a bowl of this, whatever it is. Accept us and leave us alone and, and we're fine. Yeah. So actually, it wasn't until college that I actually started studying anything about Asian American identity and what that meant, and sort of like the pitfalls of this model minority myth of like, actually, there are quite a few people who don't fit that projection, that story, who are not, will not become lawyers, doctors and engineers that, either are, I guess, struggle much more than sort of that model minority archetype, or want to break out of that, want to be doing creative work, want to be actors and artists and things like that it's like you have to be an accountant before you become an artist, and it's sort of like puts us in a certain place of survival before we can actually express who we are. So
I want to confess an embarrassing moment between us where when I think we were in Egypt and we were watching a movie and an Asian character came on and I said, look, it's Marcus. And you very matter-of-factly were like, oh, because it's the only Asian character. And I was like, oh shit.
Feeling so many moments like that I just ignore, actually. Like, okay, like it's just like I don't actually feel like the hurt that I feel, actually. Right now I'm thinking about the Japan boy comment in Haydn when, anyway, I was just in the kitchen and, I'm literally the only Asian person in this whole spiritual community. And it's like, just like, just making funny jokes about race, right? That just, and it's like, I can like brush it off and it's like having a thick skin about it, but also, this part that's actually hurt by that and doesn't want to admit that because then it's weakness, then it's like, oh, you're not being agreeable, right? And if you're offended by that, it's it's your problem and it's not my problem. I can say, I'm just saying a joke. Like, what's the big deal?
What's the big deal? Yeah, and it makes you more invisible too. Like you have to make yourself invisible even when in your pain, because the pain is too much for you and also causes discomfort, and then you're the person who causes discomfort in a community and being one of the only faces that's not white. Like how is that?
For me, I guess it started from the very beginning.
From when you were born?
Yeah, from when I was born. And I didn't really have any Asian friends until college, when it was like, that was my rediscovery of Asian culture, like Asian American culture, Asian culture in general. Like I was like, I need to like connect with this because I don't know who I am. And sort of this inherent identity crisis of being born not look like anyone else around you. So I spent summers in China, um, not even where my father is from, but just in that country, just to like feel the lineage there. I visited Southeast Asia, Vietnam, all these countries, just to kind of like, okay, like where is it? What is this connection? Like, what is it? I need to discover this. I need to know more about this. So I think it was during that time as well that I was diving deep into spiritual communities.
Yeah.
And predominantly Buddhist ones, and especially the ones in America. It's basically middle-aged white people is the demographic, middle age and old age. So not only was I like one of the only Asian faces or minority faces, it was also like the age difference. I was like 22 and everyone else was like 50. And it was sweet. It was like really beautiful actually in some ways to be like with more elders or with more of that crowd. But it felt really isolating, I think. And yeah, and it's just, I think in spiritual communities as well, it's like we tend to go to the transpersonal, right? So we go to like the experience of transpersonal love and, awakening and clarity and all of those things. And like the details of your humanity don't actually matter. Like that's just, that's just the wrapping on the transcendent, and it's not that important. And so let's not, okay, you have some mommy daddy issues maybe, but like let's not try to go too much into it. Just just meditate it away, basically. Which obviously didn't work for me for trying that for a decade. And yeah, I think there were times when I was like, I really wish there were more faces that look different in these groups, and not really being able to say that very much. Or there's really no space for that. A lot of places. So yeah, I think it created a sense of isolation, a sense of like, this part's not welcome in myself. It's not welcome, in these communities. And so I was like, let's just not talk about it because everyone just gets uncomfortable. Basically.
Yeah, it's really uncomfortable. I find that identifying as queer and being in spaces with a lot of heteronormative, it's like, I don't want to be tokenized. I don't want to be the face of the movement. I don't want to be the face of this other culture.
Yeah.
Because it puts you in a very vulnerable place. And so, and I pass, look, I look straight.
You could be hetero.
I could be hetero, no problem. So it's really easy to make that part of me invisible. But it's really painful to have to leave that part at the door and to feel in those spaces that there's a part of me that is not welcome here, that if I talk about, people get uncomfortable and often laugh it off or brush it off as not important. And do you have experiences of something like that, or any particular one that you want to share that was particularly painful?
I guess, that there are a few things to come to mind, and like painful, but also transformative in certain ways. I remember I was in basically a sexuality training, and it was kind of the men's group portion of that training, and it was like the men sort of like expressing their own rage or their own sort of like feelings of being inadequate or not enough, or all these different pieces, which I could relate to, pieces, like for example circumcision, like whether or not you've been cut, and like the experience of that, and like the trauma of that. And I mean, I'm not cut, but like I can understand some of these pieces around our male bodies and all of that. I remember, and I was the only Asian person in the whole group, and it was all white group. And I came in the circle, and I was like, this sense of, like what I was born into as a male body, but also like a masculine and feminine in a male body, and the sense of like my masculine being taken away from me at birth. Like, oh no, you're an Asian male. You have very feminine characteristics. I have very soft skin, and like I'm very thin. I don't have like a lot of like huge muscles. And so it's like the sense of, oh, Asian men are effeminate, and this is the way we've been portrayed in Western society. And like we're not manly, we're not man enough, we don't have that masculine. It was and so like big saying from in the middle circle and saying like, I was emasculated before I was born, like let alone my body being cut or not cut, or like how my parents treated me. It's like it had nothing to do with that. Just being born in this body, like I was already emasculated because society saw me in a certain way, right? And so women are not attracted to Asian men. Like it's like that came in from the beginning of like, oh, okay, I'm unattractive, and I'm effeminate, and therefore I have to fight, just to be seen as have a masculine presence, and I have a strong feminine, there's a part of me that really honors that, and also like I want to also honor my masculine aspects as well. And so I think that the pain of that, and so it was transformative just to like be able to say that in a group and to be able to like be seen in that, even if it was not anyone who had that experience before. Or knew what that was like, but just for myself to experience that and be seen in that was powerful.
Thank you. I know some of your story, and I don't know if you want to go into any of it, but I know there were some kind of violent things that happened around you and your family, specifically in this community around being Asian. And there's so many different parts to it, and as there always is, but it was something that was held against you. And I've experienced it while walking around this neighborhood, that people talk about, oh, the woos, with a bit of we have edge.
We have a legacy.
A legacy, and like how did your heritage play into that, and what are you still working through? These are really big questions. Thank you. There's definitely a lineage piece of being an immigrant in a country, and not always being accepted, and so my mother, I think she learned early on that she needed to, for her to survive or to do business or do anything, she needed to have white faces represent her. And so living in the community where we are now, she was basically the developer of this area, and helped and sold lots of land to people to build their houses, but she used basically a white front of lawyers and different engineers and things to basically help do that, because she knew in this part of the country, of the US, that there's a lot of prejudice against people who are not born here, who don't look like the rest of the people who live here. And so she was operating like that for, I think, 10, 15 years. And it came to a point where there was tension in the community of just decisions about what they wanted to do with common property and things like that. And it became very quickly, it escalated into, like racial types of, not physical violence, but like kind of hostility. And so we would drive in. My mom has built a house here, which we're sitting in. We drive in, we see giant signs on people's lawns of like, woos, go back to China, go back to where you came from, and let them put the woo over your eyes, and like using all these, this hostility because of disagreement we're having about some of the community issues. And so for me, just like feeling, like really scared to, be here, and who knows what's going to happen. This is kind of, it's Maryland, but this is like the South, and like there is a history of racial violence. And I think my mom, she stayed here and she like stuck it out, and she has this sort of like, she's tough
as nails part of her that's like, will not back down, will not give up. And eventually I think she was like, we'll just stick it out, like the neighborhood will change, people will leave if they're uncomfortable, and it will transform. And it has over the past 15 years. People who were really uncomfortable with us being here have left, and new people have come in who are feel much more open. It's there's still tension in the community, but the sense of like I don't know, like we're here, like we're gonna be here, like we're not leaving, like we're American like anyone else, we're not gonna get up and leave. So and just that in the lineage too, and like there's a terror that like shows up in the lineage, that we don't feel safe in our home, we don't feel safe living in this country in certain ways. It's like there's a fear that grows there. So I think for me, like being able to feel that, being able to like not get paralyzed by it, because I remember in my 20s, it was quite paralyzing. I just wanted to run away. I was just like, fuck this, like I don't want to be a victim of racial violence. Like, and I also was very mad at my mom. Like, why would you do this?
Make
like,
yourself
just,
visible.
Yeah,
why are you invisible?
Like, why are you trying to stir up these things? Like, just be, like, don't incite people's anger, right? But it's, yeah. So it was my own sort of like unwillingness to face the discomfort and actually like, no, like, we have a right to be here and we have a right to be treated with respect, and a right to have a life that's free from fear and prejudice and all of that, and just like everyone else does. And like, okay, like, yeah, that's something that we need to stand for, and for ourselves and for everyone else.
This is sort of why I want to have some of these conversations, is because privilege is something that's invisible to us when we have it and super apparent when we don't. And trying to inform people who have privilege what that feels like or looks like coming from a different perspective is super painful, and really it puts you in a very vulnerable position. And I feel like it's essential, and especially like I want to talk a little bit about like our teachings and where we come from in this whole idea of identity and pulling out of identity, because one of the things I'm really feeling is there's a spiritual bypass that can happen when we're in a spiritual group where we're like, oh, we're not going to identify with the personal, which means the personal issues people have don't matter. But when people come with a different set of trauma, and some of it inherent because of their sex, their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, it puts you in a position of precariousness. Do you want to?
Yeah, what it's bringing up is, like, and also realizing deeper for myself that piece of like, when we don't feel safe, it's hard for us to even come towards. And so it's like, in spiritual communities, there's so much, there's actually much beauty in it, but it's like the door doesn't feel open to a lot of people. And so it's either like, okay, I need to cut off this part of myself to walk in the door to experience like the beauty and the transcendence and like the awakening and like the healing that's here. And that's actually the only option, actually. Like, I need to cut off part of it to be able to do that. And part of me that even judges that, of like, cut off part of yourself so you can join us. Like, what's your problem? It's like, because I've done it, that means everyone else should be able to do it. And it's, like feeling the harshness of it, actually. The sadness.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, and I mean, there is beauty in these teachings of like coming back to the personal, which is something I'm very, that's been the hardest part for me, I think. And it's like, I think there is space and there is sort of like enough inclusivity in these teachings in this tradition to come back for those pieces. But it's like, we need to be willing to go there and have conversations and have like, like, feel others in what they're going through, just to be able to approach something like this,
part of my feeling, and I could be wrong, but is that disidentification, like having the larger perspective and pulling back, also means centering yourself in other people's suffering in a real way, in a way that knows that people's day-to-day experiences are very different. And the day-to-day experience really matters in how visible you can be, how effectively you can show up, how much is working against you to actually show up, and to make those things also like putting them on the table. Because I feel it also happens in our community, it happens in the greater, in our culture, in the world culture, and specifically in the US, but in our community too, the barriers to actually showing up and doing the work in a very visible way are greater depending on where you're coming from and what you bring with you. And it doesn't make it, I don't think anyone's victim, I don't think anyone's perpetrator, but it's like being able to stand in the greater heart of humanity and know those things. It feels really poignant to me and essential in this work we're doing, is to hear the stories that aren't being told. Like, we talk a lot about like certain kinds of trauma are centered, And it's not that those traumas are super essential, but there's also other traumas that feel like they're being marginalized that make it so that, I know some of my trans friends, and I even know trans people in this community who will not make themselves visible because it is fucking scary to make yourself visible in a way that puts this thing on the line. And it's almost as painful to have it, it's painful to have it attacked, which is what can happen on the outside, but it's also super painful to have it made invisible. Like, that doesn't matter here. Like, this is a place where those issues don't matter. When you know in your heart, it's like, I'm experiencing how it matters every day. And it being marginalized, or not being able to talk about it, or feeling that you're the only person in the room that can talk about it from the experience. And you're like, I don't want to put this out. Like, there's so much that can come back.
Yeah. Cool.
You have anything else you want to add?
I think there's also a thing that that I do, and I feel like I've seen this before in others as well, of like, those of us who feel a bit other, like, we'll compare ourselves to the other people. It's like, is your experience worse than mine? Like, better or worse than mine? And like, like, how do we navigate that? Or like, there's some sort of competition of like how marginalized we are, like the victimhood sort of like spiral. And I think wanting to break that in myself, or wanting to at least name it, of like, okay, is my experience as an Asian effeminized male like better or worse than a trans person who has, it's like, I don't even, like, it's not about that, right? But it's like, like really wanting to understand others' experiences, and not to play perpetrator or victim, but just to like feel them and really feel that, and like, and that's the one humanity piece of like, okay, I, like, where is my experience the same, like, where can our experience meet in the sharing of that? And talking about things like, let's bring up singularity, like this movement, this, or a global sort of planetary kind of politics. It's like, it also needs to include the whole humanities experience in that on the personal level. And how do we do that? How do we start talking about that? How do we share those experiences? How do we, I don't know, build a field where that, I guess, that collective trauma in some way can be presenced and can be felt and can be allowed to be there, as we also feel the one humanity. Thanks for bringing this. I love you. And
thanks for being willing to have the uncomfortable conversations.
Open for more as well.
Me too.